Radio's Breaking Stereotypes 2021 and my first show of this year. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I have with us three amazing and brilliant inspirational ladies for tonight's show. But before I come on to that, I would just like to start the show by first of all thanking the Ramadan radio team to invite me onto the show this year. And before I move on, I should also say who I am. I am Zainab, the presenter and host for Breaking Stereotypes. So whilst I thank Ramadan Radio, I also want to dedicate tonight's show to my Nanima, who is my maternal grandmother, whom we lost very early this morning. So apologies for this heart and face for tonight. I am slightly nervous. I'd also like to dedicate tonight's show to an uncle of ours that we lost a mere week ago up north, both the nephew of my grandma. So two family deaths this week. The reason why I want to dedicate the show to those two people is because it literally just fits their motto in life. They were people who have left legends behind, a legacy behind, and they were not one to ever hold back. And that's why, tonight is in their honor. So moving on. So tonight's show, although it's titled Your Career, Your Faith, we all know that earning a halal income is based on our own efforts and is encouraged by our Prophet ﷺ. And by choosing a profession that benefits the Ummah, our career will not only be a source of permissible income, but it will also allow us to become closer to Allah, benefiting us here in this world and also in the world hereafter. And therefore, indeed, earning a halal income is very much encouraged. Now, I'm not here tonight to discuss what professions are permissible, but rather the take-home key point to note tonight is going to be that you can have a career and you can navigate your faith together in sync. And that brings me on very quickly to a story that my Nanima said, which is why I actually want to dedicate this to her. Because in my prep for today's show, this story was going to be in there. Now, most of you know I qualified as a solicitor almost 2 years ago now after a very treacherous journey. And I met my Nanima 2 years ago when she visited the UK from India at a dinner that was hosted by one of my aunties. And my Nanima sat me down and she said to me that she was very, very happy with me qualifying as a solicitor, but in Gujarati, and I have to say this in Gujarati because it sounds awesomely cute and funny. And she goes, "Beta, what's kustu? Ketu baini wakil. Wakil beta, wakil de kitlu juttu bole." So basically, in her interpretation was, she was pleased that I qualified. She was pleased I did something with my life, but she was just a little bit worried that qualifying as a solicitor means that I'm going to be lying all the time, because that was her perception growing up in India with whatever their situation was over there. I'm not going to comment on that, but India's legal system is different to our legal system, and it's now moving on as well. So for her, that was her perception, and it fits in really neatly with our faith in the fact that actually being a lawyer here in the UK, we can't behave in that way. There are strict rules and stringents in place, and we do not compromise or should not have to compromise our faith. So now I move on to our guests tonight. They are all barristers, and funnily enough, all work in the same chambers, and I did not intend for it to work out that way, but it has. So I'm going to start off with Sultana Tafada, and in no particular order, I'm going to introduce them. So Sultana is a highly experienced human rights and international law criminal justice barrister. She acts in high-profile counter-terrorism and national security cases. She's part of a number of organizations, and I'll list a few: Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, roster of criminal justice sector experts dealing with counter-terrorism. She's also the chair of Oxford Advocates on Human Rights, special advisor on human rights to the Oxford Initiative for Global Ethics and Human Rights. She's the member of Legal Expert Advisory Panel for Fair Trials International, member of the detention experience of Avocats Sans Frontières, chair of the Muslim Lawyers Action Group, and she also advises on international human rights issues. So that's a lot that Sultana's involved with. We next have Salima Mahmood. She's a senior barrister at number 5 Chambers. She has been qualified for 22 years now. She specializes in criminal defense work, and it's predominantly involved with violent, sexual or drug offenses. She's born in the Midlands, raised in the north of England, and returned back to the Midlands when she married, and she's a mum of 5 children. She does some media work, which includes TV and radio, including Raising the Bar on Radio 4 and ITV's Crime Stories. I might have to get some tips from you, Salima, a little bit later on how to present. And then lastly, but not least, we have Nabila Malik. She is also a barrister of 22 years and more. She is trained in leading corporate commercial law sets, and she would describe herself as an equalities lawyer. She sits on the Birmingham Law Society, number 5 Chambers Principal Office of the Gender Subcommittee. She's the editor for the discrimination pages Tolly's Employment Handbook. She will soon have a postgraduate diploma in mental health and neuroscience. She has a passion for representing the underdog, I love that, and will always fight their corner hard, irrespective of the view of others. And alongside a computer personality match that she undertook, her faith is what governed her decision to become a barrister. She believes that her faith and the British legal system strives for fairness. And I absolutely, abhorrently agree with that. So moving on to tonight's evening, as I said, we're not here to discuss what professions are permissible or not. We are here to talk about the barriers that you came across and the stereotypes that you have broken down, being practicing Muslims, being females and working in a career professional environment. So if I can present the question to Nabila first, please. How has your career and your faith ever clashed?
Well, I don't practice in criminal law. I'm a practitioner in employment and public law. I probably describe myself as an equalities barrister. And in that respect, I'm quite lucky because I don't encounter the same ethical dilemmas that sometimes can be encountered by practitioners in other areas of law. As you said, there are professional obligations that we have, a code of conduct, which we have to adhere to. So I think that my professional conduct rules allow me to represent and conduct myself professionally in a way that is in sync with my faith. So I don't believe that I have to act in a manner that allows me to be conflicted. I've been fortunate because I do believe it's the areas in which I practice. I'm representing people who are claimants in employment tribunals, discrimination cases, and in public law, judicial review challenges, challenging state organs, local authorities, state departments, etc. So I'm always representing the underdog. And so that means that a lot of the times I feel that I'm actually acting as my faith would require me to act for those who need representation, the impoverished, the those who don't have the ability to represent themselves, and those who need a voice. And so I think that there are very few occasions where I am in a position where there is a clash. I think that my faith, in fact, rather than provide me with difficulties, informs the way that I should behave in representing my clients. The dilemmas, my goodness, I don't think I've had real dilemmas. I've had difficulties sometimes where I've had a really greedy client and I'm trying to settle something. And I feel that they are being particularly rapacious in the approach that they're taking to negotiations. And I think sometimes, that I feel that a sense of fairness rather than a sense of wanting to take advantage of perhaps a desperate respondent. So in those, I suppose that's the one situation where I could think, I feel that my faith does inform me because I feel that I should conduct myself fairly, whereas professionally, of course, I should be able to take advantage of a vulnerable, not vulnerable isn't the right word, of a desperately seeking respondent employer who wants to settle a claim, or a state department, or a public body that is desperate to settle a claim.
It's like having the
and I should be able to exploit that. But yeah, in those circumstances, obviously governed by my professional code of conduct, but at the same time, governed by a sense of fairness, and that does come from my faith.
That's brilliant. I appreciate that. Jazakallah so much for that, Nabila. I'd like to then compare your answer with that of Salima's, because Salima does work in criminal defence work. And in terms of breaking down barriers, growing up, I thankfully never had that much contact with criminal defence lawyers, but there is a perception, there is a stereotype, that some barristers, some lawyers will do whatever they can to get their clients off. Now, working in law, yes, we will do what we can to get them off. But what we won't do is fabricate the situation. We won't fabricate evidence. We won't lie. We won't do any of those things. So in terms of your experience with the kind of work you do you feel it's ever clashed with when you practice the faith?
I think firstly, we have to make clear that even those of us that do defence work have a moral and ethical code that we have to work by, and we have to work in accordance with our clients' instructions. So one of the most commonly asked questions I always get asked is, well, if you know your client's guilty, how can you defend him? Firstly, both Islamically and within the judicial and justice system in the UK, everyone is entitled to representation. When I said that you have to work in accordance with your instructions, of course, if your client tells you that he or she is guilty of some wrongdoing, then the best you can do for them is to achieve the best possible outcome, which isn't necessarily an acquittal. I have many clients who tell me that they've done something wrong, and they've got an explanation for why they've acted in that way. And as a barrister, as a Muslim, that it's my job to try and get the best possible outcome for that person's individual circumstances. There are times when your client tells you something that you don't agree with, because it's not something that's permitted within your faith. It's not something that you would condone. And that's where your code of conduct comes into play. We are not here to judge our clients. We're not here to make judgments against them. We're here to represent them in the best way that we possibly can. And so there has to be that balance between our faith and our religious and personal beliefs and representing our clients in a professional manner.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Salima. I'm glad you did highlight that about the code of conduct, because in fact, it doesn't matter what area of law you are working in, and whether you're a solicitor or a barrister, there is the code of conduct. You do have the bar rules to adhere to, and that's what regulates what we can and can't do. Sultana, if you're available, I'd like to present that question to you as well. And especially given your extensive background in terms of human rights and terrorism and national security cases, do you feel that your career has ever clashed with your faith?
Okay. So thanks, Zainab, for the question. Apologies if there's a bit of background noise. I am driving, so forgive me if there's too much interference in the background. So the bulk of my work for the last 5 or 6 years has been mainly counterterrorism and national security work. So that means terrorism cases in the criminal courts, but also national security cases in the High Court. And also I've done a little bit of radicalization cases in the family courts. So the work and I've also done inquiries and inquests relating to terrorism incidents. So the work I do spans across crime and civil, but a bulk of the work that I do, or a big bulk of the work that I do, is criminal law. I haven't found any clashes with the work I do and my faith. Our faith requires warrants a fair trial. we start off with the presumption of innocence. So we assume people are innocent until the state has proven that they're guilty of something. Again, that's totally in sync with Islamic values. The burden of proving it lies on the accuser. Again, that's an Islamic principle. So the state has to prove that somebody is guilty of what is alleged. And as Salima has said, quite rightly, Islamically, everybody has the right to a fair hearing and right to representation. And so I feel that what I do is not only entirely in sync with Islamic values, but it's something that's actually required by Islam for us to participate and ensure that a fair trial is upheld.
Brilliant. Jazakallah so much for that, Sultana. And thank you for joining us tonight. I know you were not available to physically come on video, but I appreciate you coming on audio. I want to move away from the career aspect of it in terms of what we've just been discussing and kind of tackle the actual stereotypes that you've broken within your career, whether that's with clients or whether that's within the environment or whether that's with colleagues. I mean, you are female, you are in a very fast-knit environment, quite cutthroat, shall we say, competitive. Once upon a time was predominantly dominated by the men. I'm not too sure how far away we've actually moved away from that and led into the female side. What stereotypes do you feel that you have broken down being a barrister, being Muslim, practicing your faith, and then working in law in the areas that you do? So if I can go to Salima for this one, please.
I think when I started out quite a long time ago now, one of the things I noticed was that unfortunately the IC reception came from Muslim counterparts. So when I first started practicing in crime, I was probably the only Muslim Asian female barrister in Birmingham that was doing crime. Very quickly there were more of us, but certainly when I first started out 22 years ago, there were very few of us. And the one thing that I found difficult to understand was that there was a perception by Muslim solicitors that their Muslim clients would not take kindly to having to take advice from female Muslim counsel. That's something that thankfully now is starting to change. But that was certainly one of my biggest shocks, to have that lack of support from other Muslims who were instructing other counsel but wouldn't instruct me because of my faith and the perception that a male Muslim defendant wouldn't take kindly to being advised in criminal proceedings by a female Muslim counsel.
Okay. Well, we have come a long way from that, thankfully, and as more women enter the profession, mindsets are changing, and again, that comes down to breaking stereotypes. Females are just as good as their male counterparts. Nabila, can I present that question to you as well, please?
Like Salima, I started at the bar a long time ago, and I was the only Muslim female in the Chancery Bar, full stop. Wow. And I was surrounded by male, predominantly white, public school, Oxbridge educated men. The chambers at which I trained at, three women, Lady Arden, who now sits at the Supreme Court, and then two other females, and the third female was in fact part-time. So, and then there was me, and then four, and then other male pupils. So it's very male environment, and that was a very difficult environment to work in and to be a pupil in. And I think that I suffered for it in lots of ways that probably I didn't realize at the time, but my much more older self realizes that my younger self suffered for being the only in that environment where I couldn't really connect with anybody. And I was also having to explain myself, go to drinks parties that were mandated for pupils to attend because we needed to network and we needed the tenants who we worked with to get to know us. And so I'd be constantly asked whether I drank, whether it was religious, whether it was something I didn't enjoy, etc., etc. And so it got really tiresome because obviously, for me, it was obvious. I thought, oh, I don't drink because look, I'm Nabila, I don't drink, I'm a Muslim, etc. And then it got to a point where I was having to pretend by carrying a glass of something like grape juice in my hand to pretend that I was drinking something so that I wouldn't be asked questions. And I suppose time has got an awful lot to do with it, because at that time I found it quite difficult and uncomfortable to have to answer questions. Now it wouldn't bother me at all. I would mock the question itself. And so I think that times have changed and the bar has changed as a profession, and those coming into it must know that they come into a very, very different profession to the one that I came into. And I think that's quite important to stress that things have changed, largely because the numbers of Muslims that now exist have changed. But just going to Salima's point, that she was saying that a lot of the people who were Muslim men had in fact questioned whether they should be instructing her. Well, similarly, in the civil areas of law, you'll find that a lot of the Muslim solicitors, male solicitors, or female solicitors, for certain areas, they prefer to have a non-Muslim white male represent them, because they think that voice in court is going to be far more authoritative a voice, one that has gravitas, than my voice. And so that still happens. And that is something that is going to require a total sea change in culture. For anyone who's read the Race Commission's report and the backlash as a result, they would have identified that things are not changing very quickly. But the bar has changed in the last 20 odd years, and it's a much different bar. The people who have to change are the people who are instructing us. And in fact, it's our very own community. Muslims themselves have to change and start seeing other Muslims as capable persons professionally. And that's when you're really going to get the change.
I can only imagine what you have all gone through over the years. I mean, I've been qualified for only 2 years, and previous to that, I was doing my training contract. And I still, to this day, sometimes when we pick up the telephone calls, and, you know, there is a bit of salesperson work, you know, you have to convert the leads and the inquiries. And when I'm talking, somebody will straight away ask me, what's my name? And as soon as I say Zainab, they either laugh at the name or they'll be like, okay, is there anybody else I could speak to? I'm like, no, there's me, and that's what you're going to get. Even though I can put them through to someone else, why should I put them through to someone else? And sometimes I'll get that blatant person who'll turn around and say, I don't want to talk to you, put me through to someone else. And when I do put them through to my bosses will straight away turn around and say, I'm putting you straight back to her, because she's completely capable of dealing with your inquiry and I don't need to speak with you. So you have to have that support system. You know, yeah. That support system is very key. So I do want to pose this question to Sultana, but we need to go to a break right now. So hopefully, inshallah, when we come back from our break, we'll pick up where we left off, and then we'll have some time for some more questions. So Jazakallah everyone, and see you shortly. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Ramadan Radio 87.9 FM, Breaking Stereotypes in a Positive Way. I am your presenter and host, Zainab Sattar. Tonight we have three inspirational females, Nabila Malik, Salima Mahmood, and Sultana Tafado, all barristers from Number 5 Chambers. The question we had before we went on the break was, what difficulties have you faced in your career as a barrister, what's navigating your faith? Salima and Nabila were kind enough to answer the question, and we now pose that to Sultana, please.
Thank you. So I guess we all have similar experiences. Much like Nabila and Salima, I guess we face difficulties or stereotypes in terms of, race, in terms of gender, in terms of religion. And I guess there's the added stereotype for, if somebody's wearing a hijab. So I wear a hijab to court. And I started at the bar about 15 years ago. And at the time, I didn't know of anybody at the criminal bar that was wearing a hijab. And 15 years later, I know of one other trainee, somebody who's training to be a barrister who wears the hijab. But other than that, at the criminal bar, I don't know of anybody else. And there are women who wear the hijab who do, for example, family law or immigration. But again, it's very limited. And so you have this added stereotype that you have to fight. And again, stereotype, just like it's already been said by Nabila and Salima, you have clients who may have certain ideas or views about you. You may, but once they've encountered you and dealt with you, that changes, thankfully. Sometimes also we have solicitors who instruct us. And sadly, within our own community, we have solicitors who don't hold a very high opinion of those of us who are from the same background. And I think that's something that really needs to change, because I feel sometimes that perhaps it's a colonial mentality that we have to thinking that white middle-class men are somehow better equipped, even though those of us, much like those who are here today speaking, are undoubtedly better qualified in terms of dealing with some of these cases. And the fact that we've had to fight harder to get to the positions that we're in and to deal with these types of cases should be testament to the fact that not only are we just as good, but it should be testament to the fact that we are perhaps even better than our white male counterparts. And so I feel that within our communities, we need to break out of that stereotype. Also, of course, we have the usual stereotypes of, when we go to court, you stereotyping by judges, by, other courtroom users. I've lost count of the number of times I've been asked whether I'm, the defendant, whether I'm the usher, whether I'm the court clerk, and whether I'm the interpreter. So there's always an assumption that we're something else other than the barrister in the case. And so I think that a lot needs to be done. It is a very different place. The bar is very different to when I started 15 years ago. There have been gradual changes, but not enough. And I think a lot more needs to happen for it to really become a place where everybody can engage in. It has to become a friendlier place for barristers of different backgrounds to join. So a lot more needs to happen. Thank you, Zainab.
Thank you very much for that, Sultana. What I'm actually taking away from that is we need to be that change. If we want change, we need more people to come into the profession, whether it's a career at the bar, and when I say bar to those people who don't know what that means, it's being a barrister, whether it's being a lawyer, whether it's being a pilot. I really want my daughter to be a pilot, and she just looks at me and laughs. And I know what she's thinking, oh, she can't be a pilot, but there's nothing wrong with it. Everybody knows I ride a motorbike. My husband rides a motorbike. And it's the more of us do it, the more change that will be possible. But at the same time, it's to have that confidence and it's to have that belief. And before I move on to the next question, I just want to say that when I was doing my research, and I do a lot of research before I'm about to undertake something, because it's just, I need to have that knowledge. But I came across something a while ago where Abu Huraira said that the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, if one of you were to carry a bundle of firewood on his back and sell it, that would be better than asking a man who may or may not give something. Now, you can interpret that in a number of ways. The way I interpret it is that as long as we're earning a halal income based on our own efforts, then that in itself is permissible for us, is halal for us. So why be worried? Why be scared? And it's like the double-edged sword, is damned if you do and damned if you don't. So break the glass barriers, break the glass ceiling, go over and above, and be that change that is much needed, especially for the younger generation. Which then brings me on to my next question. Now, I have quite a few questions, but I don't feel it's going to be possible for us to cover it all. But what I do want to actually touch upon is, Sultana touched on this just a little bit, to say, well, first of all, what can be done more in order to assist, whether it's in this profession or others, in terms of how can you navigate both your career and your faith and break those stereotypes? And that kind of ties in with tips for our listeners as well. So what needs to be done, and what tips are there for our viewers who might be just a little bit more nervous and skeptical? So let's go with the one first. So if I come to Nabila for you on that one, in terms of what can be done more in ensuring that we can navigate both the religion and our careers whilst breaking those stereotypes in a halal way.
Okay. I used to wear the hijab when I was a lot younger. And I was one of the few girls at that time. I'm a lot older than most people at the bar, Muslim women, that is. And the thing is that when I used to wear the hijab, the interesting thing was that it was Muslim girls themselves who were quite uncomfortable with the fact that I wore it, which is quite interesting, because that leads me to my journey in deciding that it wasn't necessary for me to wear the hijab, taking it off. And I don't wear the hijab now. So that's the point that I wanted to make. And so I appear in court like everybody else. My appearance in terms of my clothing and my and the fact that I don't wear a hijab means that it's very difficult for people to instantly see whether I'm a Muslim or not. And so for many people who don't recognize Arabic name, because Nabila is of course an Arabic name, they don't know whether I'm Hindu, Sikh or Muslim or whatever other religion I could be. So I don't encounter those kind of challenges of biased presumptions that mean that I then have to navigate my conduct in a certain way to break down those biases. However, having said that, my career and my faith work for me in terms of that I am somebody who keeps my faith as a personal matter for me. I'm a very independent person. I have a very independent relationship with God. I believe in all aspects of our faith, angels and spirits, etc. And I have my own personal perspective on certain things. My very personal nature means that I practice my faith personally. And that means that I come home, I pray, and then there is this divide between my professional life and my life at home. Now, for many people, that isn't the case. They want to be able to, their act of worship is to wear attire that allows them to show, such as the hijab is an act of worship, of course, for some people. And they also need to be able to pray on time. There are those facilities. And so those facilities in courts now exist, and there are rooms that one can go to, and court staff are helpful in assisting. So for many people, they can now practice their faith in the way that they want to and continue to work. So in terms of daily challenges, I don't think they exist. They're breaking down. I know there are difficulties still with courts having places to worship, and that continues to be a problem, but it's getting better.
Brilliant. Jazakallah for that, Nabila. If I can present that to Salima, please.
I think in terms of encouraging other people, women within the community, to think about joining the bar or doing the LPC and becoming solicitors, one of the primary areas that I think needs change is the social stigma. So unfortunately, within a lot of our community, people feel that it's not a job for a woman. It's not a job for a Muslim woman to have to speak to nasty criminals and have to speak to witnesses about intimate aspects of their life. And I think that social taboo is one of the biggest barriers that prevents our younger women from choosing law and the bar as a profession. So in my view, if there was more support within our communities, and there is, please don't misunderstand me, there is of course support for our young females who go into commercial law or contract law or even family, but certainly not the nasty work of criminal law and criminal defence. And I think that if that social taboo was broken down, then there'd be a vast amount of encouragement. The area of law that I practice is one where you have to be on your game, you have to be sharp, and you have to predict in many respects what's coming your way in terms of the evidence that will be heard before a jury, in terms of problems that might arise in the trial. And there are many, many capable young women in our community who would fly in that profession. But I think there needs to be better support within our communities that will inspire confidence in our young sisters. And once they are confident, then they will rise in their chosen profession, knowing that they have a belief in themselves and others have a belief in them as well.
Again, that's the support system, is it now? Very well put there, Salima. Thank you very much for that. Sultana, we have just a few moments left. So if I can pose that question to you as well, please.
Yeah, sure. So coming into the profession, I had, I guess, the usual anxieties in terms of, like, for example, would I be able to pray on time? Would I be able to not would I be able to, but how would I do all of this? How would I guess, deal with the logistics of praying when I'm in the middle of a case or in court in the middle of a cross-examination? How would I cope if I'm fasting during Ramadan? What do I do about shaking hands? What do I do about social events where alcohol is served? I have to say, actually, to some extent, I feel that the anxieties were far greater than the realities. I mean, I don't shake hands. I mean, now with COVID, that's one issue that we don't have to deal with. But usually, I mean, sometimes they would just say, look, you know, I don't for religious reasons, but just say it in a kind of nice, friendly way, where, you know, nobody takes offense. Generally, people don't want to shake hands anyway at the bar. Or sometimes I just clutch onto a big wad of paper and both hands are occupied, and so nobody would, you know, attempt to shake my hand. In terms of praying, I've been in court, and, you know, if I feel like there's a prayer time, I'm going to miss a prayer time, and I can't do that particular prayer at lunchtime or after court, then I have asked, you know, by the court clerk, I've asked the judge if I can have a short break. And usually there's always a mid-morning or mid-afternoon break anyway for the jury to have a, you know, stretch their legs or, you know, refresh, you know, go, you know, refresh themselves, have a cigarette. So again, there's always opportunities. And if not, you can ask for a short adjournment and you can go and pray. In terms of Ramadan, again, we all have to do whatever jobs we're doing, whether it's during Ramadan or not. And I'd say we continue in much the same way. But as I've, I guess, gotten more senior and I can manage my work diary a lot more, I try and take off as much time as I can during Ramadan. So, and in terms of social events, I don't tend to go to events where alcohol is being served. Does that stop me from getting work? No. At the end of the day, you know, I have those solicitors who will give me work, whether or not I go to social events where alcohol is involved. A lot of the work comes through my own networks anyway, so I'm self-sufficient. And for those that don't support me because I don't go to these events, there'll be those that do support me. Because I don't go to these events. And there are lots of solicitors who instruct me, you know, again, who are Muslim and will support me and do send me work, and I don't need to go into those types of social settings. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all, you know, it's all risk and qadar is all from Allah. It's, whatever we're going to get anyway. And so I think people sometimes assume when coming into the profession that, they're going to face these insurmountable obstacles. It's you stay true to your faith. You don't really have to compromise on those things. And, it doesn't mean you suffer, you can't have a good career. I haven't found that an issue at all. And so I would say to people coming to the bar, don't have these anxieties needlessly. There was a time when there were no prayer rooms in any of the courts, and I would get security to open up like little conference rooms, or sometimes what looked like little cupboards to pray in. Now, every courtroom there's a prayer facility. So I don't think people need to worry and have those types of anxieties. I think what really people need to address before entering into any profession, including the bar, is to deal with, I guess, their mindset. What I feel that a lot of our people tend to suffer with is with imposter syndrome. They feel like they wouldn't fit into this profession, and what they need to work on is getting their head around the fact that they are just as entitled and just as capable and just as able to enter into the profession and succeed. So I feel that's what we really need to work on as a community. Thank you, Zainab.
Jazakallah so much, Sultana. So eloquently put by all three ladies. From that, what I've learned is that it's a more tolerant society now than it was before. If somebody wants to shake your hand and you turn around and say, we can't, our religion doesn't permit it, before, they'd probably be, shrug their shoulders, make a slight derogatory, I can never pronounce that word, derogatory comment and probably walk off, but now it's a bit more, it's different with all the different rules and regs that have come in. And so Tanya, you touched upon the prayer rooms, and actually that's a really good one, because yes, the broom cupboard, I'm lucky, alhamdulillah, I now have an office. So if I wanted to pray my namaz here, I can do it. I sometimes go home and pray my namaz, if it's qaza or adab, because the actual wuzu facilities are not that great and it's quite difficult. So it depends upon, what I can and can't do. But now, for those who don't know, I am also part of Muslim Lawyers Action Group, in which I've met Salim and Nabila and Sultana and many other people there. And there was a picture going around on our WhatsApp group about one of the prayer rooms in one of the chambers being closed. And I was just in awe of the fact that they've got a proper wudu khana, and it said wudu khana on it. And, it was a proper prayer room and everything. And I was just in awe. And I was like, wow, if only we can have that in, every organization, every employer, how easy and how we would be able to then amalgamate our prayers during the working time, maybe take our lunch a little bit shorter. But times are changing, alhamdulillah, and that's really good to know. So I want to say Jazakallah to all three, Sultana, Salima and Nabila, for joining me this evening and answering my questions and presenting yourselves in such a lovely way to our audience. And I hope that people do take home some key points from this. And like I said, it's not about just the profession of the bar or law. It's about any career that you want to come into. I mean, we all have transferable skills, and it's all about how you as a person can grow, continue in your faith, and also continue in your career. And it's about building on your confidence. And one thing I have learned over the past year, especially as a mentor for a lot of students out there, if you are unsure, reach out to other people out there. There's plenty of people willing to help. But if you don't reach out, you're going to find it very, very difficult to actually overcome any anxieties that you might have, any stereotypes that you want to break, because you don't know how to go about it. So do reach out. There are people that are there willing to assist. So we are running out of time. So before I wrap up, I do want to just say, Jazakallah to the listeners and the viewers for joining in tonight. I hope that you did take away some inspirational parts from tonight. And I hope I have done my nanima and my uncle justice with tonight's show. It was dedicated to them. And I will get over the tears that are bulking up in my throat. Next week, we have a really lovely lady joining us, Khadija Mansour. She's a trainee police officer, She's the first police officer to wear the hijab made by New Zealand's police for our uniforms for the police. So she will be coming on the show to talk about the stereotypes that she's been breaking down as a young lady, as a young Muslim lady, wearing a first hijab made by New Zealand police. So do tune into that next week. And I would like to say Jazakallah once again. This is Breaking Stereotypes in a Positive Way with Zainab Zaid, Ramadan Radio 87.9.
Thank you very much, Zainab.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
So much.